Hi, it's Margie with the Asking Spot, and this go around I'm asking, can I do a dupe?
What?
Yeah, that's right. I want to do a duplicate of this Anthropologie piece. I simply love it. I'm going to use some air dry clay, and for my armature underneath it, I'm actually going to use some plastic containers. That top part with the little wood handle, love it. And I know you're thinking, well, I don't live by a beach. I'm not going to run out and buy driftwood.
Everybody,
I
grab a
think
stick!
I have an answer to that too. So let's get started. First things first, got to cut these cleaned containers down and then start playing with some clay. In addition to a very smooth, flat surface, which is what this wonderful glass cutting board is serving, you also are going to need some extra little things like, well, a rolling pin would be nice, although in my case, cardboard tube, as long as it's good and sturdy, that would work just fine. If you are going to use a rolling pin, even if it's a food-based one or one like mine, you still might want to use some wax paper to go over the piece because the clay can get pretty sticky. And if you're going to use your rolling pin on food again, that's probably a no-no. Other things I'm using are some scrap pieces of poster board I had laying around. I'm going to use this as my guide for my thickness. So they're going to be on either side of the rolling pin with the clay in between. And then finally, a tool that's really ideal and super cheap. It's none other than a paper clip. This little line here, this piece, you just fold it out, it becomes just the most wonderful tool for carving out the clay. Gonna do two different clays for this piece because
Why?
I have to. No, not I have to. I have to. And why not? So I know that this one, the DOS, I know for sure that works. The reason this one works so well is because it is a clay with some paper fibers mixed into it, so it doesn't shrink as much. This other clay I'm using, I don't know if it's solid earth clay or if it's got paper fibers mixed into it. So I'm just winging it. We'll see how the results turn out. Through a good deal of trial and error, I have learned that when you're trying to do these clay dishes that you want to look like, well, the duplicate that they are, you want to make sure precision plays a role. So when I roll out the clay, not only am I trying to get an even amount of clay out, but I'm also going to make sure that my edges are kind of even all the way along. So I'm going to, cut out a piece that's just slightly more than what I need on the sides. And then when I'm matching the base and the sides together, I'm also going to roll out a little bit of clay to act as sort of caulking, for lack of a better word. It's going to be the seam that holds them together in addition to the cutting in and doing the little texturizing. And that should dry out to be a more balanced, even piece. 24 hours later, you can definitely see that this one is still very much wet and it's not moving very well on the table. This one is also not moving on the table, but it's a lot drier on top. I'd say there's some moisture here. This little bugger, oh look, that came right off. Still very wet. That's 24 hours later for these guys. I kind of made a mistake with this step. Not this part of it. Went out in the yard, found some sticks that I thought would make a good size handle, and I just started peeling off their bark. Wore gloves for safety. Some chisel I had laying around. I think you could use just about anything though that would be sharp enough to get some of this off. It wasn't that hard to do. Now, the big mistake I made was when it came time to bleach them. I went ahead and just poured bleach straight on them into this bucket. I didn't need that much. I could have let them soak a little longer in, say, 50-50 bleach and water. Instead, straight bleach, I was done in like minutes. Not good. So once I get a good deal later, you go ahead and rinse them thoroughly and then let them dry. Speaking of drying, the little high diffuser disc thoroughly dry by this time, and the main part of the dish is actually fairly dry too. But the lid, it's not moving. And that's okay. That's a sign that it's still not dry.
How long is this going to take?
Yeah, so 4 days later, the lid finally comes off. Now it's time to sand. Now, normally, I wouldn't use a orbital sander on something like this, but I had 320 grit sandpaper, and my sander has an adjustable speed, so I slowed it down a lot. And yeah, it did make it a little bit easier to do it this way. I still, in the end, though, had to do some finer point sanding by hand, but considering how many of these I was doing, this certainly sped up the process. While doing all the sanding, it occurred to me that I have an old bamboo stick I could use as a handle.
Somebody get the stick.
Just using some twine here, I measured a length that was like twice the length of the whole stick, one for each side. And then I just kind of tied a knot to keep it sturdy to the base, and then another circle round and a knot at the bottom to the stick.
Tying knots, yay!
Just you and your hand. Tie a shoe, toss a salad.
You got this! You got this!
I can't see! I can't see! Are you done?
Fire.
Before we look at the final results, let's look at what our inspiration piece was. And if you could, please click subscribe, give a thumbs up. That really helps out the channel. And now, the final results. Yeah, I ended up making 3 of them. I had a lot of yogurt containers. I hope that inspires you to say, yeah, I can keep some yogurt containers around and recycle or upcycle them rather than tossing them. And I thank you so much for watching the Asking Spot. Got bloopers next. Now with the second one, I'm going to try and be a little bit more like the Anthropologie one with a curve on it and the lip. So in order to do that, I'm taking my plastic armature and giving it an extra armature with the foil.
This isn't going to work.
This could turn out to be a huge mistake. I'll just, save this section so it's easy to edit later that, yeah, I knew it'd be a mistake.
Nailed it.
But no, the idea though that I'm concerned about, and the reason I'm using this extra bit of armature is if I had done this with just clay and say made it extra thick like this for the curve on the flat, this depth of clay, it would dry so much slower than the rest of the clay on the piece. And when you have that greater distance between dry times, that's when you're more than likely to get cracks.
You are correct.
At least I think. So that's why I did this. Hopefully this isn't just a giant mistake I learned from, but we'll see. I don't know for sure if this version has clay in it.
Cool. I might even, like this time around Christmas. Ooh, that makes sense.